This happened a little over a month ago. I'm 34 now, and I've hiked in Pinewood State Forest for years. It was my way of finding some peace after long weeks of teaching middle school kids. But that last hike changed everything. I can't shake the memories. The morning was bright and clear, just a regular Saturday in late September. I parked my car near the entrance and grabbed my backpack. Stepping onto the trail felt good. The scent of pine filled the air, and the sunlight filtered through the trees. It was calm and familiar, just how I liked it. Then I noticed something strange. There were symbols carved into one of the trees. They weren't random. They looked too deliberate. I frowned, trying to make sense of them. My gut told me they were important. A cold chill crept down my spine. I didn't know why I felt that way, so I shrugged it off and kept walking. A bit deeper into the woods, I saw someone sitting on the edge of the trail. They had a slight frame and disheveled hair. They were just staring blankly at me. My heart raced. I saw they were holding a small doll. I wanted to ask if they were okay, but something stopped me. I felt like I shouldn't interrupt. I walked past them, my mind racing. The figure didn't move or say anything. A strange weight settled in my gut. The next day, I felt this pull to go back. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that what I saw wasn't real. I took a different path this time. The woods looked the same, but felt different. Then I noticed strange animal tracks on the ground. They were bigger than anything I'd ever seen before. Curiosity got to me, so I followed them. The deeper I went, the more I heard muffled laughter in the distance. It sounded like children, but it felt wrong. My skin prickled all over. I thought about turning back, but instead I pressed on. The woods felt alive, like they were watching me. I quickly decided to head home, uneasiness nipping at my heels. Each subsequent hike revealed more things I didn't understand, but I convinced myself it was all in my head. I tried to ignore it, yet the whispers of doubt hung around me like a thick fog. I never figured out what those symbols meant. I never saw the figure again. But every time I closed my eyes to sleep, I thought about that laughter. Was my mind just playing tricks? What if something really was in those woods? Then one night, I heard that laughter again. It was clearer this time and came from outside my window. My heart raced. I turned to look, but I saw nothing there. That feeling of being watched clung to me. I can't shake it off. The woods feel different now, and I sense things are just beginning. I couldn't take it anymore. The whispers echoed in my mind, fading in and out during the day, but loud and unsettling when I tried to sleep. I needed answers. So I planned another hike. This time I wouldn't ignore anything that felt off. On a misty morning in early October, I set out again. I felt steady resolve mixed with anxiety. As I walked deeper into the forest, the familiar sense of pine and damp earth offered little comfort. The trail felt more daunting this time. When I reached the spot with the carved symbols, I stopped. They seemed to almost shimmer in the low light. Curiosity battled against fear. I leaned in closer. There were lines and shapes I never noticed on my previous visits. A few of the symbols seemed newly carved. Was someone coming here regularly? Then I felt it, that prickling sensation racing down my spine again. I turned my head slightly, and my breath caught in my throat. A flash of movement darted between the trees. My heart pounded. It wasn't just my imagination this time. Someone, or something, was out there. I took a cautious step back, ready to run if I had to. But before I could gather my thoughts, a crow landed on a nearby branch, cawing loudly. The sound startled me, shattering the silence. Something felt wrong. It was as if the forest had become a stage, the trees watching my every move. I heard it again, the muffled laughter, but this time it was clearer. It drifted on the wind, and my heart raced. It was childlike, innocent, yet deeply unnerving. I looked around, half expecting to see a group of kids playing hide and seek, but there was nothing, just me and the towering trees.
Then I saw something move again. Not just a shadow, but a figure, a small child standing in the distance. I squinted, confusion washing over me. They were facing away, but seemed to beckon me forward. My instinct screamed for me to turn back, yet I felt pulled toward them. I took a few steps toward the figure, heart pounding in my chest. That familiar coldness wrapped around me, squeezing tighter the closer I got. But just as I was about to call out, the child turned around. It wasn't a child, not fully. Their face was obscured, but two bright eyes stared back at me, alien, lack of warmth, filled with something sinister. I froze. That laughter surged back, a cacophony tinged with malice. Then everything went dark. The sunlight vanished, leaving me engulfed in shadow. I whipped around, panic seeping into my veins. The trail I'd walked on was gone, replaced by thick black mist. The sounds of the forest fell silent. That's when I saw them, figures emerging from the trees, their movements jerky and unnatural. I turned to run, but the mist closed in around me. I couldn't find the path anymore. I was lost. In a frantic search for escape, I remembered the carvings. Maybe they held the answer.
But as I stumbled back, my hands brushing against the trees, I realized some symbols were warm to the touch, thumping like a heartbeat. There's something in these woods, something alive. I need to know what it wants before I lose myself completely. But deep down, a new fear began to settle in. What if it already had? I stood frozen in the dark mist, my breath shallow, as the figures moved closer. They didn't walk like people. Their limbs seemed to twist unnaturally, and their heads tilted at odd angles. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Reality twisted in a way I couldn't comprehend. I thought about running, but my feet felt glued to the forest floor. Instead, I focused on the strange symbols around me, desperately trying to recall anything I had seen on my previous visits. Some felt like they were alive, vibrating under my fingers. I had to believe they meant something, but fear fogged my mind. The figures drew nearer, their eyes glinting with that same eerie light as the child's. I felt their presence pressing against my skin, cold and suffocating. Somehow, I knew I couldn't scream. It was as if the very air around me absorbed sound, trapping my terror inside. Then, from the midst of the figures, I saw something different. A flash of red fabric. It looked like a child's jacket. My heart skipped as I realized it might belong to the same kid I thought I had seen. Panic surged again. Was this child lost? Did they need help? Or was this a trap? Just as I was about to shout out into the void, the mist shifted, and I caught a glimpse of the child. Their mouth opened, and instead of words, what came out was a high-pitched wail, echoing through the trees. The sound clawed at my ears, merging with the whispers that had haunted my nights. Time froze. I shook my head in disbelief, fighting against the overwhelming urge to flee. I had to know what they wanted. I stepped back, my instincts wrestling with a maddening curiosity. That's when one of the figures reached out, its fingers elongating like twisted branches. It pointed toward the carvings. For a second, I hesitated. Maybe they wanted me to understand something. But as I took a step toward the symbols, the figure lunged forward with an agonizing speed. Instinct kicked in. I spun around and ran. The thumping of my heart drowned out the whispers, but each step felt heavier, like the ground itself was trying to hold me back. I ran deeper into the mist, branches clawing at my clothes, scratching my arms. I was disoriented, every direction looking the same. I couldn't remember which way I came from. My senses betrayed me. Sounds became shapes, and shapes morphed into nightmares. Then I remembered the crow. The shriek of its caw had ripped through the eerie silence before, a warning. I needed to find that tree. Again, I veered toward where I thought I had last seen it. Instinctively, I reached for the symbols one more time, searching for any that might guide me. As I brushed against a particularly warm symbol, an image flashed in my mind. The child's jacket, the looming figures, and a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the forest, watching. The realization hit me like a jolt. They weren't just lost souls, they were guardians. Or traps. Just as I turned to run, a laugh echoed again, leaving a chill down my spine. I was being hunted. I had to figure out who or what was behind this before it was too late. The mist shifted, revealing a narrow path. I hesitated, but then bolted forward, praying it would lead to safety. But then I heard it again. The laughter, this time unmistakably close. I wasn't alone. It just got worse. I dashed along the narrow path, breathless and terrified. My heart raced as branches snatched at my clothes and claws of mist curled around my ankles. The laughter followed me, rising and falling as if mocking my desperate sprint. I had to make a choice: trust the path or turn back into the chaos of the figures. I chose the path. What could be worse than the darkness behind me? Then, just as the trees began to thicken, a glimmer caught my eye. It was a glint reflecting off something metallic, a rusted compass half buried in the dirt. In a frantic motion, I snatched it up, brushing off the muck. The needle quivered before settling, pointing north. I didn't know if it would lead me to safety, but I needed any guidance I could find. I glanced over my shoulder. The mist seemed to twist and curl, but no figures were in sight. Their laughter faded. For a moment, I dared to hope I was getting away, but the gnawing unease in my gut told me otherwise. Focusing on the compass, I pressed forward, keeping my pace steady but fast. The fog rolled in again, thicker this time, wrapping me in its suffocating embrace. I stumbled into a small clearing and stopped dead. There was something in the center of it, an old, gnarled tree with twisted roots that seemed to spark with energy. The air hummed. I could feel it in my bones. Beneath the tree, the ground was marked with deep grooves, forming another set of symbols that looked similar to the ones I'd seen before. Before I could think, my instincts urged me to approach. Maybe this tree held the answers. As I stepped closer, the laughter returned, echoing like a twisted melody in the air. Panic flushed back into my veins. What did the tree want? Before I could touch it, from behind the tree's sprawling roots, a figure emerged. It was a child, wearing the unmistakable red jacket that had been draped in shadows. My breath hitched. "You," I gasped. "Are you lost? Is this a trick?" The child's face was still, almost blank, but I felt a wave of sorrow wash over me as their eyes locked onto mine. Then, the figures I'd run from appeared on the edges of the clearing, their grotesque postures silhouetted by the fog. The child turned to them and whispered something I couldn't make out. A chill wind swept through the clearing, scattering leaves, sending a whisper of movement that felt alive and aware. One of the figures stepped forward. This one appeared different. It held a lantern, dim and flickering. I squinted against the light. It didn't approach menacingly, but seemed to beckon me forward. A part of me wanted to flee back into the mist, but I felt drawn toward the tree. "Please," I murmured, "tell me what this means." As the words left my mouth, the figures froze, and the child smiled, an unsettling grin that stirred something deep within me. Then everything went still, and in that moment of terrible clarity, I found myself sorting through the past, and understanding would soon come at a price I couldn't afford. Just then, the laughter crescendoed, and the ground beneath me trembled. I braced myself. The true horrors of the woods had just begun. The ground shook harder, a deep rumble that felt like the forest was alive, ready to swallow me whole. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. The figures shifted, their laughter transforming into a discordant wail that curled around me like smoke. I felt trapped. "Please," I called out to them, my voice small against the din. "What do you want?" But the words crashed into a wall of silence, and it was as if the woods held its breath. I took a step back, feeling the ancient tree at my back. Its bark was cold and rough, the symbols etched into the earth now glowing faintly. I noticed the child's eyes flicker. There was understanding there, or perhaps recognition. It was as if they had something to tell me, a warning hidden behind that eerie smile. As the figures advanced, the child pointed toward the compass in my hand. I felt the weight of it, heavy and daunting. I glanced at the needle, still trembling, but pointing definitively north. Suddenly, I understood. Whatever the tree was hiding, I had to find it. The figures shifted again, their forms becoming less distinct, almost blending into the fog. My instincts kicked in. I had to move, to follow the compass. With a rush of determination, I turned away from the tree and ran, leaving the unsettling laughter behind me for now. The fog thickened, but I kept my eyes on the needle. Each step felt charged with energy, as if the very ground was guiding me forward. As I dashed deeper into the woods, something strange happened. The laughter faded, but whispers began to fill the air. They were soft, almost coaxing, circulating around me. Words I couldn't piece together, but understood on some level. Not safe. Follow. It must be. I tried to shake off the words, but they wrapped around my mind. Where was I supposed to go? I focused on the compass again. It still pointed north, unwavering. Suddenly, I burst through another thicket and found myself at the edge of a small pond, shimmering under the faint light. The water was clear, but reflected an unsettling image. The figures were just beyond the tree line, peering at me like curious shadows. My breath quickened. They were right there. "Where are you going?" a voice hissed from behind me. I whirled around, heart racing, but the voice belonged to the child again. "You shouldn't have come here." The sorrow in their eyes had deepened, and behind them the twisted forms of the figures crept closer, swirling with an intent I could not grasp. In that moment, panic clawed at my throat. I needed to escape, to make sense of all this. I backed away from the edge of the pond, the reflection of the figures dancing in the water. Then I spotted something glowing beneath the surface. It pulsed like a heartbeat, promising answers and dangers all at once. But before I could decide to plunge my hand into the water, the child made a sudden movement, causing me to freeze. "You have to make a choice," they said, urgency creeping into their tone, "or they will choose for you." I stared into the depths, the weight of their words crashing over me. This was it. Whatever lay beneath the water could change everything, or end it all. As the figures stepped into the light, their laughter started again, but it sounded different this time, almost hungry. I felt the air thicken around me. The child's words echoed in my mind. I had to make a choice, but what choice? The glowing object beneath the water called to me, its light flickering like a heartbeat. Every instinct screamed at me to dive in, to unveil whatever secret lay hidden. But then I noticed the figures had stopped moving. Their laughter had hushed to an eager murmur, as if they were feeding off my hesitation. My heart raced, caught between fear and curiosity. I glanced back at the child, whose expression was now strained, as if they were fighting against something much bigger than both of us. "Please," I whispered, "what do I do?" Before the child could reply, the water surged in a sudden rippling motion, and the glowing object flickered violently. My breath hitched as I caught a glimpse of what it was, a small, crystalline orb, glistening with unknown light.
For a split second, it felt like my own heart was mirrored inside that orb. It was mesmerizing. "What happens if I touch it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Then you will know the truth," the child replied, their eyes pleading. "But be careful." The figures began to shimmer more vividly, their outlines sharper now, and reaching towards me, hungry still. I took a deep breath and stepped closer to the water, every nerve in my body screaming in protest. The child's words rang louder in my head. I had to do it. I stretched out my hand, soul gripping in fear, and plunged it into the water. Coldness hit me like a wall. The water felt alive, slithering around my fingers. I groped for the orb, my heart threatening to explode in my chest. As my fingers grazed its cool surface, an electric surge shot through me. Suddenly, I was pulled under. The world above faded into murky distortions as I sank deeper. Images flooded my mind, glimpses of the past, whispers of the forest, visions of the figures, with expressions of longing. I saw their pain, their laughter a mask for a heart-wrenching sorrow. They were not what they seemed. I fought against the icy grip of the water, desperate to break free, but the memories flooded in stronger. The tree, it was a prison. The figures were bound to this place, guardians of its secrets, but also its tormentors. There were stories to be shared, but they could not break free. I felt I was witnessing something sacred, yet tragic. Then I broke the surface, gasping for air. The child was still there, eyes wide with fear and hope. I clutched the orb tightly, my heart racing. The figures were silent now, waiting, expectant. "What did you see?" the child asked, urgency rising in their voice. "I saw their pain, their need to be free," I managed to say between breaths. But as soon as the words left my mouth, everything changed. The laughter returned, but this time it was different, agitated. "They know," the child said, moving closer. "We have to leave. They won't let you take that." I looked back at the figures, their faces twisted with something darker than before. The hunger was gone, replaced by a sinister intent. They were beginning to move again, swiftly and with purpose. I zipped my hand out of the water, clutching the orb like a lifeline. "Then we need to hurry." But as I turned to escape, a shadow slipped from the thickets, a new figure emerging from the darkness, blocking my path. Just as the forest erupted with their cacophony, I realized the real danger was just beginning. Panic surged through me as I stood frozen in place. The figure in front of me was cloaked in shadow, its features obscured. Dark eyes glinted like coals, studying me with an intensity that sent chills racing down my spine. I couldn't make out the body, and dread washed over me. "Step back!" the child shouted, suddenly moving between me and the shadow. "It's not safe." But my feet felt glued to the ground, fear rooting me in place. I could see the figures behind us, their spectral forms hovering, their energy crackling like a storm getting ready to break. The air was taut, filled with a tension I could almost taste. "Who are you?" demanded, my voice trembling but defiant. The figure stepped forward, breaking the balance between us. The child pulled at my arm, but I kept my gaze locked on the figure. "Your curiosity has led you to us," the shadow spoke, voice low and melodic, twisting the very essence of every word. "You hold what does not belong to you. That orb is ours." A wave of defiance shot through me. I grasped the orb tighter, its surface warm against my trembling fingers. "You don't own it!" I shouted back, the strength of my voice surprising even myself. The shadow recoiled, features shifting slightly, revealing a grim smirk. "How naive," it hissed. "You are only a visitor here, a pawn in a game far beyond your understanding." At that moment, the figures behind me surged forward, their arms stretching, their faces contorting into masks of rage and sorrow. They seemed to meld into one, their collective anguish drowning out my thoughts. I felt a force pushing at my back, urging me away from the shadow and toward the water. "Come!" The child tugged at my arm again, urgency in their small voice. I shot one last glance at the shadow. It hovered there, watching, amused. The child yanked me into a sprint, and the figures followed in a shadowy flow, almost as if we were being pulled toward the water. "Why are they chasing us?" I gasped, glancing around as fear fueled our escape. "They can't let you leave with the orb, but if you go back into the water, you'll see the truth again. The water holds what we need." Truth? It felt like a trap. But the alternative, being trapped in this place forever, at the mercy of that shadow, seemed worse. Before I could think, I dove into the water, the cold enveloping me instantly. The child followed. As I submerged, bubbles surrounded me, distorting my vision. I focused on the orb, letting it guide me to the surface. The water shimmered with possibilities, stories swirling all around. Suddenly, I felt the weight of many presences closing in. Panic sank deeper than the cold water as the figures reappeared, faces filled with urgency. They were less menacing now, appearing both terrified and hopeful. "Don't resist," one whispered in my mind. "Release the orb if you want to understand." But in my gut, something felt wrong. As the shadows approached, I saw the reflection of the shadow figure in the depths, one that mirrored mine, twisted and different. "What if?" I started, my mind racing, but before I could finish the thought, darkness pulled me under once more. And that's when I realized the truth I had been seeking wasn't what I expected at all. As I sank deeper into the water, the coldness wrapped around me like a vice. I could barely see, but the shadows loomed closer, their whispers intertwining with the rushing water. I felt the orb slipping from my fingers, its warmth fading as dread gripped my heart. "No!"
I thought, fighting against the pull of something malignant. The shadows throbbed with energy, swirling like a dark storm around me. "Release it!" the child urged, their voice seeming miles away. I wanted to scream, to protest. I wasn't ready to let go of the one thing that brought me here. Yet the weight of the figures was pressing down, and every breath felt like it might be my last. Just as I thought I would drown in the chaos, a flash of silver light pierced through the murky depths. The orb pulsed, illuminating the water around me. I instinctively reached for it, and the shadows recoiled at the sudden brightness. "Listen!" a voice surged through the darkness. "All is not as it seems. You must choose." I hesitated, feeling the forces pulling at my mind, battling the desire to understand and the need to survive. In my hesitation, doubt crept in. What truth was waiting for me below? What if releasing the orb doomed not just me, but all that I loved? The silver light flickered, and with one burst of clarity, I realized I had to decide. I couldn't just be a pawn in this game. I had to seize control. With newfound resolve, I clutched the orb, feeling its vibrations sync with my heartbeat. In that instant, the world around me transformed. The shadows momentarily faded, their anguished faces shifting into one of recognition. I saw sorrow and understanding within them. Gradually, they started to take on clearer forms. Their whispering tongues spoke not of malice, but stories long forgotten. "Embrace the truth," one figure cried, their form becoming more human, their eyes filled with ancient wisdom. "We were lost, trapped by our own choices. Only you can set us free." Everything turned chaotic again, the waters twisting with that newfound knowledge. I could feel the currents trying to drag me deeper, the shadows swirling around as they urged me to listen. "Find the heart of the orb. Only then will you see."
But then the shadow re-emerged, fierce and relentless. You think you can change fate. You cannot escape. It reached for me once again, extending a hand that flickered with shadows. Suddenly, all light dimmed, and the water closed in around me. I felt a surge of fear surge through every inch of me. The orb was heavier than ever, pulling at me and demanding a choice. The child's voice echoed in my mind, urging me to trust. And in that moment, I made my decision. The truth couldn't remain buried any longer. I had to break free. As I released the orb, the shadows recoiled, the figures gasping in surprise. The current shifted. Then everything went dark. I woke up gasping, the cold water splashing against my face. I was lying on a rocky shore, the taste of salt heavy on my tongue. Blinking away confusion, I scanned my surroundings. The waves lapped at the edges of a stone-strewn beach framed by dense trees.
They were shadowy and twisted, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Breathing hard, I pushed myself up, feeling the grit of sand on my palms. The orb, my orb, lay nestled beside me, its glow faded but still lingering on the edges of my consciousness. I reached for it, but hesitation filled me. What if releasing it had been a mistake? It wasn't a mistake, the child's voice echoed in my mind. You just need to remember. I paused and clutched my head, trying to block out the disorienting whispers from the water. I had to focus. I had just escaped that struggle, but whatever came next loomed large. I stood shakily, still feeling the pull of the shadows as I glanced back at the water. Something moved beneath the surface, and my heart raced. I couldn't stick around to find out what it was. Turning away from the shore, I walked into the trees, my heart thudding in my chest. The forest felt alive, breathing, watching. I could hear the rustle of leaves, the distant caw of crows, but there was another noise that whispered just out of my reach. It beckoned me deeper, and curiosity nagged at the corners of my mind. What else is out here, I wondered. Alone, but not really alone. I could feel the shadows creeping just beyond the trees. My pulse quickened at every snap of a twig. Taking a cautious step forward, an image flickered in my vision. The child from before, their eyes wide, begging for help. But I felt unsure of how. I wasn't equipped for this, whatever it was. Then I noticed something ahead. A worn path, barely visible, overgrown with weeds and bushes. I hesitated. Should I follow or keep running? A low growl echoed from somewhere deep in the trees. My instincts screamed at me to flee, but my feet betrayed me, drawn to the path despite my fear. The growl echoed again, and I pressed against the rough bark of a tree, trying to make sense of the darkness before me. Trust the truth, I murmured. But what is the truth? As I set off slowly down the path, I suddenly tripped over something buried in the ground. I stumbled and fell, scraping my palms against the dirt. When I looked back, I saw a metal object half buried in the earth. I pulled it free, and a chill washed over me. It was a pocket watch, tarnished and old. The glass cracked, the hands frozen at midnight. Just then, the growl erupted again, louder, closer. My heart raced as I clutched the watch. That's when I saw it, a pair of glowing eyes peering at me from the underbrush. Panic surged through my body. The shadows were here. I took off running, adrenaline pumping through my veins as the shadows whispered my name, their voices taunting me with every step I took. The path twisted and turned, branches snagged at my clothes, and the growl reverberated in the underbrush behind me, growing dangerously close. I didn't dare look back, fearing what I might see. The worn trail gradually opened into another clearing, but it didn't feel like the safety I sought. Instead, it was an eerily quiet space, filled with towering trees that loomed ominously overhead.
I stumbled forward, my heart racing, the pocket watch still clutched tightly in my grasp. Maybe it held the key to understanding this cursed forest. As I caught my breath, I glanced around, desperate to find something, anything to guide me. That's when I spotted the figures, still lurking at the edges of the clearing, their forms vacillating between shadowy and corporeal. They looked tangled with anguish and desperation as they flitted silently behind the trees, their eyes glistening like dying stars. The laughter echoed from a distance, drawing nearer, and I realized that they were no longer chasing me. They were waiting. What did they want? What were they expecting from me? I shivered at their watchful gazes, feeling the weight of my own decisions settle upon my shoulders. Make a choice. The voice of the child echoed in my mind again, reminding me of the urgency that fueled my original quest to uncover their truth. I looked down at the pocket watch, its surface glinting like it held a piece of the moon. I released how it felt akin to a key to something buried deep within the forest, maybe even buried deep within me. Without thinking, I pressed the watch's face. The moment my fingers brushed against the cold glass, visions flooded my mind, a flood of memories, flashes of laughter and sorrow intertwined. I saw myself in the classroom, teaching children at the edges of their youth, a place that felt far removed from this forest, yet connected in a way I could not grasp. I dropped to my knees, overwhelmed, and the darkness around me shifted. I could feel it. The watch was revealing roots from the past, of choices made and paths taken. I saw echoes of the shadows, the figures that were once cursed, their laughter now a plea for understanding rather than mockery. With every second that ticked by on the frozen face of the watch, their faces turned clearer, adversities laid bare. It was a haunting reflection of all of us trapped in our fears. Then I realized, to set them free, I needed to embrace my own truth. I must confront the shadows that had haunted me, let go of the guilt and the unease that clung. "I choose to understand," I shouted, the declaration tumbling forth from my heart. I stood up, raising the watch high above my head. The air shimmered, and the figure stopped moving, silent as my declaration hung heavily in the air. As if my words had struck a chord, the shadows began to dissolve, swirling into the ground like wisping smoke. The laughter that had once felt so cruel transformed into a gentle melody, morphing into an echo of support. The figures
started to reveal their true forms, human, childlike, and, most of all, familiar. There was a rush of warmth as the suffocating mist surrounded me dissipated, revealing a golden light seeping through the canopy above, bathing everything in a surreal glow. The child smiled, rising from the shadows as a figure who remembered. "Thank you," they whispered, eyes bright with newfound clarity. But as the darkness receded, questions bubbled beneath the surface, like echoes I couldn't quite grasp. Was I still in the forest? Had any of this truly happened? Was it real? Or was I simply a traveler lost within the echoes of my own mind? I turned back to the pond. The water shimmered, offering a reflection of the figures that held history and burden. They lingered across the surface, a blend of past and present. But the pocket watch felt heavy, weighing down the memory of choices not made, of paths untraveled. "I don't know if I'll ever find my way home," I whispered, letting go of the watch, releasing it back to the depths from which I thought it came. The moment it hit the water, reality felt fragile, shifting beneath me like the clouds above. And as I stood there, unable to discern what was imagined and what was real, the forest whispered a soft farewell, leaving me with an ambiguous spectrum of clarity and chaos, beauty and burden. I wiped the remnants of moisture from my cheeks and took a cautious step toward the path that lay ahead, the lingering presence of the shadows both a comfort and a mystery. I may never understand what truly lived in those woods, nor if I had ever broken free, but the laughter still echoed. I felt the shadowed figures following my steps, watching from a distance as I made my way into the unknown, uncertainty mingling with acceptance. And somewhere, amid that uncertain peace, a story waited to be told. I moved forward, leaving the forest behind, though not forgotten.